Hey everybody, welcome to the Adjuster TV Facebook Live show. I'm very excited to be here. Today we're going to talk about policy analysis. We'll talk about what it is, why you need it, and how to do one kind of in brief. And after that, I'll send you guys over to adjustertv.com where I've got another homework assignment for you. And it's basically going to be a basic scenario where I ask you to do a policy analysis and then write an estimate based on that analysis. Excuse me. This is part 2 of a 3-part series, and in part 3, we'll go over some of your answers and talk about them in a Q&A next week. So, and if you don't have an active version of Xactimate, that's no problem. We'll just, you can practice later once you get a copy, or just take good notes on what we do. So, and again, for those of you who don't know me yet, my name is Matthew Allen, and I've been an independent property cat adjuster since 1999. I began this journey in the same way that most of you are now. Basically heard about this crazy gig from a friend of a friend and decided to give it a shot, and it's been quite a journey. So I took a couple of brief breaks in there to sell roofs, and I was a staff adjuster for Liberty Mutual, but in my heart I am an independent adjuster. Basically, I'm at the point in my career where I really want to get back to you guys what I've learned over the years, in hopes that you guys can benefit from my experience. So while we're at it, if there's somebody that you know who you think could benefit from this video, please share it with them now. And really quick, I want you guys to say hi in the comments so I can be sure that everything's working perfectly. Okay, so again, today we're going to do policy analysis, what it is, why it's important, and how to do one. And let's go ahead and get started. So briefly, in this 3-part mini training, you've learned the basic parts of a typical homeowner's policy that concern a cat adjuster. And in part 2, we're doing a policy analysis. And then finally, in part 3, you'll do your own policy analysis summary. And for a bonus, you can do an estimate based on your policy analysis and the provided scope at www.adjustertv.com/policy2. And that's the word policy and the number 2. Okay, so let's just jump right in. What is a policy analysis? Basically, a policy analysis is, in simplest terms, a list of everything that was damaged, if you're going to pay for those things or not, and why, and then any other factors that will affect the settlement of the claim. It's pretty straightforward. So, essentially, the policy talks about the who, the what, the when. It talks about exclusions, endorsements, and conditions. It talks about ALE, subrogation, salvage, relevant prior claims, and of course, a summary that sums all that stuff up. And now, why do we need a policy analysis? Well, for starters, a policy analysis could be called also a general loss report. It could be called a narrative. You guys may have heard that if you were working claims on Irma or Harvey. Essentially, carriers may require that you have all of those things addressed in a note somewhere in your file document. So you've got your estimate, your claim summary, you got your invoice, and then they're going to need to know when you talk to the insured, what you said to them, and then they're going to want to know like your analysis of what's going on with the claim, what you're paying for, how you're paying for, and why. So, and then secondly, another really big reason why we're doing this, even if it's not required as part of a general loss report or other report in your file, is because we're not the only people who will be touching this claim. At a bare minimum, as CAT IA adjusters, as field adjusters, it's going to be us, and at the minimum, there'll be a desk adjuster who will probably handle the tail end of the claim once we're gone from the storm site. So we need to make sure we've got a complete report for them so that when they get the file, when they're going through dozens of files every single day and they're getting phone calls from these insureds, that they can really, really quickly and easily get a comprehensive look at sort of the story of the claim. We want to have them to have as much clear information about what we did as possible. And number 3 It's really good for our careers. If you look at it this way, your claims will stand head and shoulders above everybody else's who don't include this information in their log. And all these things I'm teaching you in my videos and on my website are things that will make the carrier love you. And when that happens, they will literally ask for you by name. When you get on the first call list, it'll be on the carrier's first call list, not just the vendors, because the carriers are going to say, they're going to call, X IA firm, and they're going to say, hey, we had a hailstorm in Denver, and we need 50 adjusters, and here's 10 adjusters that if they're available, we want them to be on this storm. And then that's how you get on the short list at the carrier. And when you get that, then you're going to be busy, which is always a very good thing. So, and finally, really, it's to dot our I's and cross our T's. A policy analysis and summary creates a complete file that fully tells the story of the claim. Let's dig a little deeper on this. So who is almost always a named insured or an insured described in the policy definitions. The named insured is the person who is named on the deck sheet, and it'll be what is on your loss report. Why this is important is sometimes the insured is deceased and the executor of the estate may be your point of contact, or they have a public adjuster. You need to make a note of this and be sure that a power of attorney or some other kind of representation letter is included in the file before you start going back and forth with phone calls and emails to somebody who's not a named insured or an insured described in the policy definitions. It's not common, but it does come up occasionally out of the blue. And then, of course, sometimes if the insured is elderly or they're a single parent or they're nervous about dealing with their insurance company directly, and they may have their adult son or brother or sister or whoever. They want them to be at the house during the inspection. That's not a problem. That's not really a situation where you need to get a power of attorney or some other letter of representation. But you do need to make a note of the file that you performed the inspection, insured was home, but also you walked around the house with their adult son, Jeff, or whatever it is. So, and make sure you always put first and last names. What was damaged? When you talk to the insured and do your inspection, you'll find that the dwelling was damaged, the shed was damaged, and their patio furniture was damaged. In this case, we want to list what was damaged under this part of the policy analysis like this. We'll basically just say under what, we would say dwelling, other structures, and contents, and briefly state what happened to them. Where is the insured location or the residence premises? It's possible that you could get a claim that's at a vacation home. This is where you would briefly describe the property where the loss occurred. If it is a vacation home, this can affect coverage in that if the insured isn't living there full time or they haven't occupied it within the last 60 days and maybe they have a frozen pipe loss, it may cause a problem with the coverage if they don't meet all of the conditions. So this is something that you're probably not going to run into on hail claims at all. But if you have winter storm claims, this might come up, especially if you're in a more remote area where you're around a bunch of lakes or mountains and there's a bunch of vacation homes. So you want to be mindful of this. And of course, your management on site is probably going to bring this up and address it in their orientations. And of course, when you want to be sure that the claim occurred during the policy period, a reservation of rights letter may be required. If it wasn't, and a lot of times when you get the file, you'll also get an email or a phone call from your manager saying, hey, Matt, this one may not, the policy may have lapsed or been canceled. There may be something on the agency side that they're still hashing out. Go inspect it, but make sure you get a reservation of rights letter signed. And basically a reservation of rights just tells the insured that the carrier will investigate the claim and still reserve its right to deny it later if it turns out that there's a reason why there's the claim can't be paid. In other words, so if you find hail damage and that's covered, but it didn't happen during the policy period, their policy lapsed, then the insurance company reserves the right to deny the claim under those grounds. All right, so endorsements. We want to talk about endorsements on the policy analysis. What is an endorsement? An endorsement is an extra little thing added to the policy that can add coverage or change the way the coverage is settled. For example, replacement cost, versus actual cash value on personal property. If you remember from part 1, we talked about the personal property in the policy shows up as actual cash value, but most people have it as replacement cost because of an endorsement that's added to the policy. An endorsement can even take away coverage. In the case of an actual cash roof coverings endorsement, will take away a replacement cost on shingles because underwriting decided they were too old to insure at replacement cost. So under endorsements, you want to be sure that you list anything that will affect your claim, what you can pay for, and how you can pay for it. And the next thing we want to talk about are exclusions, which is, of course, the parts of the policy that, the parts of the claim that the insured is claiming that aren't covered because they're excluded by the policy. So for example, in a wind claim, the insurer tells you that they had water seeping in through their basement wall from the rains. Policy tells us that this is excluded, so we will list it here. I would personally even go so far as to note the section and subsection so that whoever is writing the denial letters later, which most likely won't be the CAT adjuster, will quickly be able to jump to that part of the policy to copy and paste that into their letter. So for example, you might say on page 14 of 24, seepage is excluded per section 1, exclusions 3C or whatever. So pretty important part of the policy, and addressing exclusions. If you tell the insurer that stuff's on that things are, you're denying something, but you don't put a note in the file about it, you're going to get a phone call from a manager. So under limits, we want to know about any special limits. Generally speaking, for the dwelling on like a typical hail claim, you're not going to get anywhere near the limit for dwelling. Outbuildings, you can get to limits all the time on wind claims, hurricane claims, of course, fire claims. But we also want to address special limits here, like we talked about in part 1. Under the policy, for example, we've got $1,500 limit on trailers. We have a $200 limit on cash for certain causes of loss, etc. So we want to make sure that we address those if they're, if they're an issue in the claim. And then, of course, we have conditions, which are parts of the loss. Which parts of the loss are going to be settled at ACV, like the fence? Did the insured protect their property from further damage with a tarp? And again, I can't say this enough, you have to read the policy. Even if you think something is super simple and you've got the right answer, you might not. And where this comes into play with catastrophe adjusters, in particular IAs, because we work for a bunch of different companies sometimes, you might have just gotten off a storm where the carrier you were working for in Nebraska paid all fence damage at ACV, whether it was a repair or replacement. I've seen it. But the carrier you just got assigned claims for in Oregon pays all fences at replacement cost except wood fences. So that's the only place you're going to see that's in the policy. So if you tell the insurer that their fence that's all flattened out is actual cash value and it's chain link under that policy, you're going to be wrong, and you may have to, somebody's going to have to write a supplement later or make some phone calls to, if the insurer gets really mad about it, to kind of talk them back from the edge. So you want to make things easier for people downstream from you and make sure that you put together a complete file. And this is one of those kinds of things that really will set your claims apart if you're noticing this stuff. Okay, then our additional summary items, of course, we have additional living expense, and we have subrogation. Are there any opportunities for recovery for the carrier? Typically not really going to see a whole lot of subro on most CAT claims unless somebody comes out to take a tree out and off the house on a wind claim, and they do a bunch of damage to the driveway with their truck and destroy the driveway. Then you're going to want to make a note that send that off to subrogation and probably send an email to your manager just to let them know with the claim number. So, and then of course prior claims, big deal. You want to be sure you're addressing prior claims. Because sometimes the insured will have something paid for under a prior loss and then file another claim for the same thing, and you can't pay for the same thing twice, no matter if it's different losses or not. Once it's paid for once, it needs to be replaced, and if they didn't do it, then that's, that's their kind of out of luck, and somebody should have explained that to them in the first place. So what we need to do after all this is just kind of put together a real basic little paragraph in sort of plain English, a little plain English recap of your analysis that describes each thing, not in detail, why it's covered and how it's going to be paid. For example, a simple one might be this. So we had a wildfire, which is the cause of loss, caused damage to the insured's dwelling, fire damage to the right elevation siding, and smoke damage throughout the interior. Damage to personal property from smoke. Special limits on trailers applies because the trailer was burned up by fire. There's no exclusions or endorsements. House is not livable because of a mandatory evacuation from civil authority. So, in other words, this additional living expense, even though maybe there's the house is technically livable, but they can't stay in the area because the National Guard or the police or fire department or whatever is keeping everybody out because of danger of more fire, then absolutely we can pay for additional living expense. And then you might note that there's no sub-row and no relevant priors. So that's the why and the what, and that's pretty much the how. So, the going through the policy, taking a look at your loss report, which is going to have the insured's name, it's going to have their deductible, it's going to have, it should list all their endorsements that they have under the policy. So you're going to look for replacement cost coverage on your personal property items. You're going to look for anything that takes away coverage or takes away replacement costs and just leaves them with actual cash value. And make sure that the house is, the residence premises. Sometimes you'll see two different addresses. You'll see loss location and you'll see address, and those might be different because one of them's a vacation home, and you want to make sure that you're going to the right house and that house is the primary residence premises. And if it's not, if it's a vacation home, that they were, that there aren't any limitations on how that claim can be paid. If they're not living, it's really for like frozen pipes or like winter storms where people aren't occupying houses during the winter time. Those kinds of things will come up. So I really appreciate you guys being here and watching. You can always ask questions in the group, facebook.com/groups/adjustyourtv. And we can talk about this all week. Great seeing you guys, and we will catch you later.